one word. Okay. So here's the tea, friends. I'm just having a day. I'm having a day, and all the skills I have in my day are not around. Like Amarette, who runs my life, she's not around today. So I had to be reminded what I was doing, which Joy so gracefully is reminding me what I'm doing. And oh my gosh, Joy, we have so much to talk about. I'm obsessed with this podcast, and it's only 1 minute in. Okay. Hi, Joy.
Hi, Molly.
What a great name.
Thank you.
Okay. So here's the situation. Joy posted something in our Facebook group, and I read it. So I live my life channeling my inner rageful addict, actively eating disordered self. And when I read that thing that you posted on our Facebook group, I was like, I think I wrote it to you. I was like, this is the whole story. This is the whole story. So give us a little background on where you came from and how you got here. And then I'll just ask questions, but I'm not even sure I have to say anything today because the story is just so good. Okay. Your turn.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Molly. I may be lengthy because I've known to talk for 50 minutes straight before. So
well, I'll try to, time is our great commodity, Joy. So let's
keep it a little briefer.
Yeah. And you got to remember this other thing, which is this is what I've learned through the days. Everyone's story is the same story,
Yeah.
I love when people say something like, I've been on every single diet in the world. I'm like, yeah, I get that. That resonates.
Yeah.
But the thing that you did just say to me before we started is that you've been broken up with sugar for 2 years. So where do we get to that you would be someone who would need to break up with sugar?
Well, I had been on every diet in the world.
Same.
Nothing new there, nothing unique. And I had done all these crazy diets, and I was freaking perfect at them.
What's the craziest diet you ever did?
I think the 5-bite diet was the craziest one. Talk about restriction, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I imagine the 5-bite diet is just what it sounds like.
5 bites of whatever you want.
That's it. That's all you get to eat for the day?
I can't remember. Maybe 2, 3 times a day. I can't remember. I'm
overwhelmed by that. But I just saw a diet. I don't know if you heard the podcast with Natalia Petrozzella, but she posted a diet that was something like vodka, an orange, and something else in the 1940s or 50s for women, and it was that tracks. So you've been on every single diet. Did you struggle with weight or anything did you struggle with weight as a kid, or when did it occur to you that diets were the solution for you?
Probably as a young adult, but I struggled with how my body looked because my mother was very body focused. I didn't know it though. I heard, you've got a cute figure, Joy. I heard that from my mom. I didn't hear you need to lose weight. But
what did you make that mean when she was commenting on your appearance, even in a positive way?
That it was important because growing up in my household, the way things looked was really important because everything was fine. There was nothing to be upset about. We are fine.
So you were in a family system where you buried your problems, and if you looked good, then you were good. Yeah, that'll get you into a diet addiction, no problem. Yeah.
I remember my first diet I ever went on. I think I may have tried to kind of fix food a little bit before then, but it was in my 20s, and my mom would cook the chicken breasts for me, or maybe I was in my 20s. After rehab.
Rehab for food or rehab for drugs? Whoa, very
rehab for drugs and alcohol. Yeah.
So what can I ask? Where was it the same stuff that got you into drugs and alcohol that got you addicted to dieting?
I think it's all the same thing. I think it's a lot of the self-worth of, am I good enough? Am I too much?
Mhm. Am I not enough?
Am I not enough? I mean, just the enoughness,
Yeah.
And I remember my mom cooking these, chicken breasts for me, and she was so thrilled. And I was like, oh, mom is happy with me. Because
Oh.
at that point, I had been up, I'd been down, and there was not always you've got a cute figure, but maybe you've got a cute figure, you need to get it back.
Oh, wow. So it was always like worth around your looks. And that makes so much
Yeah.
sense. Were you super vulnerable when you came out of rehab? Like, were you vulnerable? What made you go on a diet when you got out of rehab?
Oh, I didn't go on a diet right out of rehab. I put on a lot of weight in rehab
Oh, when you
because
stopped using.
basically I turned from drugs back to my original drug of choice, which was,
Absolutely.
sugar. My mom numbed herself out with sugar.
Mm. Wow.
And,
There's so
so
many people that have that story, that
yeah,
it's like the primary and then the drugs came after.
yeah.
So your diet, your relationship with dieting and sugar really took off around 20s, and like, then what happened? Like, just got worse and worse?
Well, I went back on milder drugs and milder alcohol for a period.
What's milder?
And milder, just from really hard drugs to like a little more acceptable,
Like Adderall or
no,
like
like
diet pills?
weed,
Oh, like weed.
weed and wine,
Weed and wine. That's a diet in and of itself, ain't it?
But then I had a spiritual awakening into and I'm going to use that in air quotes, into a rather strict, legalistic, religious thing. So
Fascinating. Can we
therefore, it
unpack
was
that?
a lot
So,
of thou shalt not. Thou shalt not smoke weed. Thou shalt not drink wine. So where did I go?
well, I need to unpack this whole thing because I
Okay.
think I don't know that anybody knows what a spiritual awakening is. So we gotta define that. And then so let's define that. So what is this? So you had a spiritual awakening, quote unquote, but it sounds to me almost like, gosh, I don't know, the word emptiness just keeps on coming. If we're just have two girlfriends having lunch, two friends having lunch here, right? So it's like you were empty and seeking something in a way, right? Because that's what I think diets really take that part of us that's super vulnerable. And it's really victim shaming in its own way. And it says, you really need this and you're really effed up and you're really broken and we're going to fix you. And our shakes are going to fix you. Our doctrine is going to fix you. Like, something's going to fix you. By the way, someone says that to you, run. Like, don't even sprint, get an Uber, I'll pay for it. Like, get so far away from these people. Cause I don't know, even just from a data perspective, it's like self-determination is the key to what is long-term successful. But so you fell into some kind of religious organization that made it moralistic. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Well, no, not even food wasn't moralistic, but just, my worth once again came from maybe not how I look, but what I don't do.
Oh, so in order to get off of wine and weed, you found this religious program that basically said, if you're good, you don't use drugs and
That's
alcohol,
it.
and you're bad if you use drugs and alcohol.
That's it. There was no grace. Remember, that was
Oof.
part of my post, was this grace thing really scared me.
I know.
Coming
Well,
from, yeah.
just like, spoiler alert, then Joy meets me and I'm like so loving and kind. And she's like, do not like this girl, but we're going to get to that. She's like, this girl's dangerous to me. Which, by the way, I would have felt exactly if I heard the stuff that I say now when I was 325 pounds without a solution. I'd be like, no, you don't understand me. Because that pain is so profound that the only way, and I don't know, maybe for me, I don't know, I'm interested in what you think. Like, for me, that self-hate was so profound that the idea that I would do anything other than punishing means to heal, I couldn't rectify. Like, I couldn't come to terms that it wasn't going to hurt because I just hated myself so deeply. What's your story?
Know that I really hated myself deeply, but maybe I did. Maybe I did.
Yeah,
don't
I don't
know.
know.
I'm just,
I was pretty clear on that. I went to rehab once and was like trying to convince them I was a terrible person, an unlovable, terrible person. But
parts of me definitely hold that. Yeah. Yeah, definitely hold that.
but when you're in this religious organization that was saying, you're only lovable, God only loves you if you're not using, is that what they were saying?
They didn't say that. I heard that.
Okay, good. Okay, I love that.
Okay.
Hey, the story I told, I love that, right? That's great.
Yeah.
So that was useful, it sounds like, or at least it got you off of drugs and alcohol.
It got me off of drugs. And so I just swung back from being numb in that way to numbing myself with food and being kind of crazy and codependent.
Oh, wow. What did that look
in
like?
relationships?
Yeah. Well, really, if we're being honest, the first substance is humans. The first substance is people. The second substance is food. And then we get to
there we go. Yeah.
really
Just never focused on what's going on with me, always focused on this person or that person. And it wasn't long after I was off of drugs and alcohol for good that I became a mom. So.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Funny how that worked.
Yeah.
So then what happened? And so then what happened with the food and the weight and the dieting? Take us through that path.
Well, I gained, I don't know, maybe 60 pounds in my first pregnancy. And then I found low fat dieting.
Oh, I love it.
And I found Weight Watchers, and I found the gym, and I became an aerobics instructor, and all that stuff. But I had no focus for me and my value. My value came from doing these things and then doing them perfectly. And that's air quotes once again.
Can you say more about that though? Like, what is it? Were you able to do it perfectly? And what does that mean to you?
Okay, Weight Watchers, I didn't go over my points.
I
learned how to work that. I learned how to work that system pretty good.
Yeah.
But, and then they changed the dang system because people like me were working it perfectly. And
I also think they changed the system for marketing, because for girls like me who went to a meeting, was like, I can't do this, I'm just going to go binge. Like, then they'd have to be like, no, Molly, come back, we made it different. I'm like, okay, I'll try again. And then just
I'll try again.
Demoralized by it again. So then what? So you did it perfectly, and then you were eating low fat.
And and I got pregnant again. And after I had my child, I went back to teaching, and somebody said, "Oh, I didn't know you were pregnant." It's like, I'm not pregnant anymore. So, and what other people thought about me, I'd been raised with how I look, and that's my value, right?
Right. So did you take some drastic, so then when did you get to, because I don't know, when did you get to the sugar part? Because that low fat eating was so hip and hop. When did you get to the idea that sugar was the problem?
Well, I got a little health food crazy. My mom was a pretty health food crazy person later in her life. And so I started trying to emulate that.
Right.
And so I got off of a lot of sugar and ate a lot of natural sugar, organic, healthy.
Yeah.
I just processed organic foods, and my health tanked.
Well, yeah.
And then I would go on some extreme diet because I'd be up 30 or 40 pounds. But every time I did this kind of extreme restriction, guess what? I paid a price by being perfect on these things hormonally. And just your post, my life was a postage stamp, because it was all about what is okay right there, just the food list.
But don't you think it's not like what is okay? It's like, I'm okay if I'm on this food list. And talk about a dependency, right? Like talk about a false dependency. Like somehow if they say no raisins and I eat a raisin, I'm bad or something bad happens. I mean, it's just so bonkers it's just like when you unpack it in Wise Mind, it's like, oh my God, I can't even believe I signed up. I was talking about this on the Wise Mind podcast, but like when people say to me like, well, what do you think about this protein bar? I think I want to try it. I'm like, well, then try it. Like, I don't know. I try it. I don't try it. And I think that happens with these really I think all of these programs, even mine in some ways. People say, oh, I had whole wheat bread, I'm bad. It's like, I don't know that we need to say it that way. It loses all curiosity. And I don't know, maybe you can eat whole wheat bread. Who am I to decide that? Right.
Right.
This is the part that Joy really used to take issue with me about, which I'm so excited to hear. So it sounds like, okay, so you would go on this, like, not no sugar, but this kind of orthorexic-y,
like but maybe no sugar. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
maybe no sugar for a while.
And then you'd maybe take 5 bites of food and then maybe go back to Weight Watchers and then. So then how did you, so you said before the podcast that you've been off sugar for 2 years. So like, how did you have that awakening? Was it an appropriate awakening?
Yeah. I listened to some interview on the Quit Sugar Summit in 2020. Some other health person that I'd followed for years was on there in 2018 or 2019. I don't know when it was. I didn't even listen that year, but I got on that email list. And I was like, I'm going to listen to this. I listened to part of one and it just hit. Oh my gosh, this is like addiction.
Fascinating.
And I could see like how many times I'd kind of been off sugar and off flour on a juice cleanse or whatever, natural thing. And how it always started with just one bite of, and it's just this once, and then I'd be really good. See, I didn't go crazy with it. See, it was fine.
So you saw like the nature, you saw it. And this happens a lot of times when people read Breaking Up with Sugar too. They like read Breaking Up with Sugar and they're like, never did I think to consider this to be a problem in the way that you're explaining it. Like, I just thought it was a moral problem or a diet problem. And you're like, hold on, this is like an endocrine problem. This is a dopamine problem, right? This is like a totally different way to look at it. So it's not like you saw yourself in the interviewer.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I was just completely crazy with gluten-free flours.
Oh,
it was like the bulk of my whole thing was gluten-free bagels and gluten-free.
We could get along well. God, gluten-free pizzas, I know.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, like, the science says that, what the science I follow at least says that anytime you grind up a grain, it gives your body the same impact of sugar. So when Joy is saying, well, I gave up sugar, but then I moved into these gluten-free flours, what the science that I read says is that when we're grinding up rice into rice flour, brain reads it same as sugar. When we're grinding up oats, I mean, I could snort them, and we're, then that's oat flour. For those people who have, celiac disease and can't have gluten, it's wonderful. But for those of us who have a sensitivity or addiction to sugar, it has the same thing. When I was trying to sell Breaking Up with Sugar, a lot of the publishing houses were like, do you have to say that flour part? And I was like, well, yeah, if we don't want them binging on angel hair pasta and we want them to get healthy, I do have to say that. So I didn't get offers from some houses because they were like, that just seems like a lot. And it sounds like you fit into that pile. So you were still in some misery because you weren't eating sugar. You got the sugar note, but you didn't necessarily get the flour note.
No, I dropped the sugar and the flour altogether because I got the flour. I got the flour note. I got the gluten-free note. I went, this stuff. This stuff is hurting me. It's not doing me any favors. That was whoa.
Okay.
And I thought, well, why am I even doing this? And I didn't get on a program. I just started trying to kind of cut it out. And I did mostly. And then I started like going crazy eating massive amounts of watermelon because it was watermelon season in May here in Texas.
Right.
And I went, oh my gosh, what's going on with me? Who eats this much fruit?
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize I just kind of shifted into something
Yeah.
a little more whole food, but
Switch seats on the
yeah,
Titanic, as they say, right?
that's it. That's it. And so I signed up for a video class, a 30-day challenge, and I somehow became willing to make a shift to say, okay, I'm going to let go of some of what I think is healthy. I'm going to let go of what I think is good for me. And I'm going to follow somebody else's advice. Maybe one way runaway, maybe a little bit of that. Just
Right.
saying. Maybe
So
not.
you
Maybe
sort of,
I could.
well, when you're saying one way runaway, she's referring to this idea that I say to everybody all the time, which is if somebody tells you there's only one way to do something, run away. So it's like you found someone that was like a little bit in like, do it this way or you're bad, sort of like what you found when you.
Not really. They offered some grace, but they gave a lot of really tight guidelines.
Interesting.
Now
And you were able to just see the tight guidelines.
Here's the crazy part. I thought I was doing it perfectly because I just watched the videos. I missed the note that there was a book with a food list in it and that there were serving sizes on there. So I just kind of got off sugar. I got off flour. I kind of backed off the fruit that was suggested, and I started feeling better.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. But I thought I was doing it perfectly because I'd never seen the food plan.
So what parts weren't you doing it perfectly? I mean, by the way, that word is just such a crappy thing to say, but in what ways like were you not doing it perfectly?
I enjoyed, having potatoes and I would eat too many sometimes. I wasn't doing any kind of serving sizes.
So were you overeating? Like what was, I mean, honestly, I mean, you might hate me for saying all this. Like, who cares? Like, I eat potatoes. Like, what was like,
yeah.
How was it not serving you?
Well, sometimes I would, eat my feelings in potatoes and that kind of thing. But it was a learning experience.
Yeah. So funny, like the perfectionism still lives with you, right? You're like, well, I was bad.
Oh yeah.
Potatoes. And I'm sitting here like, I know this isn't a coaching podcast, but I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that, right? Like food's tricky, food's tricky. I would have to say there's people who live, and I'm actually very curious about this in your experience. Because there are people who live very, very rigid, no sugar, no flour, perfectly weighed food programs. And, more power to them. I think it's very hard to do that for a very long time is what I've seen. And if they're able to do it, which I think is amazing, it does take a lot of impact on their life, right? Like, so that's why I wrote Breaking Up with Sugar, because I think when people think of no sugar, no flour, and even weighed meals, which I talk about in my book, they think that that's the only way. Right. So as I'm hearing you saying, well, I sometimes ate my feeling in potatoes, like I listen and I say, yeah, sometimes that happens. And that's a really great space for us to be curious about what's going on with us and have some insight. So tell me more. So then what happened?
Well, then at some point I found that there was a food list and I hadn't been doing it perfectly. So I had a new kind of like, oh, wow. And of course I had been projecting this, this is the way it must be done. Thou shalt not.
It was like a fake.
I was bringing out my religion to it.
You thought you were being so perfect. And then it was like a bait and switch. And then you were like, oh my God, I haven't been doing this perfectly. Like a new reason to punish yourself. That's amazing.
Well,
okay.
I really wasn't punishing myself. I was like, because all during this period where I kind of thought I was doing it just right, I was also learning some more self-care, learning to check in with myself, learning to give myself what I call attagirls.
Oh, I love that.
You know what? Done roasted I'm in the South. Done roasted my vegetables.
Love that.
And, attagirl. And hey, attagirl, you're, taking a walk, or attagirl, you're speaking your truth.
I love this. So where did you acquire this attagirl space? It's so contrary to what you're explaining. is your experience
I,
with dieting and food, right?
well, it may be because I had started into a 12-step program for codependency,
Oh, that'll do it. I love
where they
12-step
said,
programs for codependency.
stop getting your focus on everything else out here. Start taking care of you.
You know, that one they say, put down the bat and pick up the scarf. You know, I love that. I have about 1 million from that one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Intimacy. Into you see me. We have to love ourselves before we can love anyone else. Love that one.
yeah,
So you were
yeah.
doing so really you were doing some emotional work, right? You were doing some work
Mhm.
on yourself and not on your food and not on your food plan and not on your value via food, but you really did some work on your own wounds, and sounds like it moved into your food. Love that.
Yeah, which then helped me do a little more work on my wounds.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is. It was
Yeah.
nice. It's been good. It's been good. And then, I guess not quite a year in, and you started your podcast, and I listened, and I was
So
seems
what
a
made
little
you, yeah,
seems
because
a
I
little
like
dangerous.
it, yeah, tell me what part of you, because if y'all listen to the Wise Mind podcast, this is like a great example of us thinking that we're in wisdom and maybe being more in, emotion, brain, or fear or something. Because I love it. I mean, it resonates so deeply with me. What felt scary about what I was saying?
That I didn't have training wheels all the time, that there weren't great big curves, and that maybe I wouldn't be safe without those. That's what it was, that if I just, and I had done some experimenting, I had done some compassion and curiosity, and I had enjoyed the heck out of it before that point. But you were proposing that this was kind of you could do this every day.
Do what every day? Like do what?
To be open and to be caring for myself, to be curious,
Mm.
to check in and maybe set some things down. And I don't mean some things like some food down, but set some attitudes down.
Wow, that makes me want to cry.
Oh,
Well, I just think that, well, isn't that a lovely way to live life? And we've been brainwashed to believe that it has to be so hard and so painful. And that's the only way that a diet or a relationship with food is working, is if it's awful and you're scared all the time.
yeah. I don't have to be scared all the time. That's a great thing. That's a great thing.
So when you're saying I was making an idea that we don't have to have training wheels, like, does that mean that like you can just go ride the bike? You don't need all of these, bells and whistles to keep you on the path. If you go off the path, to steer back in. Like what does that mean?
Yeah, it's I don't have to carry the burden of trying to do this just right. I don't have to carry that with me. I can leave that and I can fly down the hill and just have my hair going, maybe take my hands off the wheel a little, or handlebars a little bit, and I can have some fun. I can have a more vibrant life. My life was more vibrant without sugar and flour. It really was.
But we can make that into a very rigid, harmful diet. That's it. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who, is like 25 years recovered from bulimia. She's wonderful, spiritual goddess. And like me, she had had some stuff during COVID that impacted her recovery from a weight perspective. And she said, I'm just getting back on. And I'm doing the most loving stuff to myself. And she said, and when I'm home, I really try to stay loving and small and be really mindful of my portions. But she has a big, huge job, because we get big, huge lives when we take care of our recovery. And so she said, when when I go out to dinner, I'm a little looser. She's like, nothing, sexy and exciting, but I'm a little looser. And I said, well, yeah, of course you are. Because if you were, rigid and small when you're out to dinner, you'd probably end up binging, right? We have to be able to negotiate our lives in the moment, right? Like, and sometimes the wind goes right and sometimes the wind goes left. And I think when we're in perfectionistic mode, the wind goes left. We're like, oh my God, I don't even know how to go left. I mean, because you said it was going right. And it's like, what? Like, how you live a happy life that way?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I started in the middle of lockdown.
That's
so
right. As so many did, which was
yeah,
that hard for you going back to real life?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Now, when I first started going out to eat, I would just be like, I've got my own salt and I don't want any sugar. And actually, I was really biochemically sensitive. I could get an exposure and it would really kind of mess me up.
An exposure of sugar, you mean?
Yeah, in a sauce or something like that. And I could just feel, I didn't binge, I didn't crave. It just made me feel really off. Now, the last 6 months or so, I can have some sugar that's, an ingredient, and because, just good luck finding some ham or pepperoni without sugar in it.
Did you ever think you would be this flexible? That again, you're like making me want to cry all day. Did you ever think you would be that flexible to say, like, just because it isn't exactly the doctrine of the rules, it still works for me?
It still works for me. No.
Okay, if you're listening, my mouth is wide open because this is the whole thing.
Yeah, because I thought it kind of had to be super, super extremely abstinent. And I had some experience where I wasn't super, super extremely abstinent. I had one piece of bacon that had sugar in it. It was accidentally fried in the house and I didn't do it. So I didn't see the package, and I had a piece. I couldn't sleep for 4 days.
Is that right?
Had terrible. Yes.
What do you think it is that you can do that with that the bacon triggers you to such an extent, but like some of the deli meats doesn't? It's just hard to know.
No, that was early on.
Oh,
I think I just didn't have, that was.
So you have more endocrine restoration, I bet. Yeah, you have more endocrine restoration. That's actually so, but listen, if you're listening and you're on day 3, like, hear what we're saying. Like, I think you're right. I couldn't eat Ezekiel, or I couldn't trust myself, or whatever languaging I want to use. Like, the idea of eating Ezekiel bread didn't feel safe to me until about 4.5 years into my recovery. And I think that was really me listening to my wisdom. Like, it just I wasn't there yet. Now it's like the staple of my life. Yeah, that's the point. Because I think I do want to say sometimes we do need like serious guardrails. I think my issue comes with these serious guardrails 3 years in, 4 years in, 5 years in. That's not learning to get into a relationship with yourself. And maybe if we're talking about this relationship with something bigger than us, we can talk about that another day, because that's the whole point of life. Yes. So it really was when you started to listen to me that you started to maybe dip your toe into the idea of like, I can understand why you would hate me for saying that, though.
Yeah, you were threatening my abstinence and sobriety, and you might, I might be just, face first into a bag of, here's a funny thing, little chocolate things wrapped in foil. A lot of drugs comes wrapped in foil.
Absolutely. I sure do. Yeah.
Then I would be, driving down the road, unwrapping and just doing that.
I get it.
Shoving it in my face.
Get it. And it's right. It's like, there comes this sort of middle path. And I think it is by trial and error. My friend Jay and I were talking in the kitchen the other night, and he said, do you really think that everybody needs to be abstinent from alcohol? Like, do you think everybody who's an addict needs to be abstinent from alcohol? Because I'm abstinent from alcohol. And I said, no. I said, no. I said that, and there's a lot of research that supports that too, right? Like, there's some people like me, and I don't know where you stand on this, where I'm like, abstinence from alcohol is the easiest thing. It's the easiest way for me to do it. I actually don't feel like negotiating that would actually take away from my beautiful life to think, should I not? How much should I have? I don't know. And in the beginning, and I think I feel that way about big name sugar, big name flour stuff. But if I'm at an Italian restaurant, I'm not like, hey, can you get me the ingredients of that tomato sauce? And I just need to be sure that I'm just like, eat your dinner. And I've eaten dinners where there's absolutely for certain been sugar. I had it the other night in the steak we had. I was like, oh, this is a bunch of sugar. So I stopped eating it, which is new, and I went on my merry way. This is really where life comes in. And I think there may be people listening feeling like this is threatening. And I would say to them, maybe this is just where you are right now. Plant the seed, right?
Someday.
Maybe just keep it open. Maybe right now, really rigid is where you need to be. And maybe one day there'll be a day where you're like, maybe some deli meat does sound okay. What else? What other sorts of
extreme transgressions? No.
Yeah, right. What sort of other evil things do you do with your recovery? No,
I know.
What other disgusting imperfections do you do? No, I'm just kidding.
Just out to eat. That's because at home it's just, it's home. It's easy to manage, but out to eat and my little dressing thing that I bring with me is empty. What am I going to do?
Right.
Do I really want lemon juice and olive oil? No, I don't.
There you go.
I'm going to have their dang dressing.
Right. Yeah.
Or, and I love sauce or whatever.
Exactly. And I love what Joy's saying. I mean, listen, Joy's saying, not day one, not year one. Like I was a couple of years in and this girl was like, hey, how about you go try to live your life a little differently? And I like my friend also, in 25 years in, she's like, and I do this too. When I'm at home, it's pretty like bow ring. I love the bow ring of it. But when I'm out, it's, more abundant, more exciting. And sometimes like right now, post-COVID, I'm having to be a lot more, have a lot more guardrails. I've actually had to probably, and I'm doing a podcast on this in a week. Like I actually had to put, 13 years in, I've actually had to put training wheels back on. Isn't that funny? I know this might blow your mind, Joy. Right in the moments where I say, take the training wheels off, sometimes you got to go back to the bike shop and put training wheels on. And I have some really significant, I'm doing a whole podcast on it, but I have some pretty significant training wheels on because I put on a bunch of weight and my body is not, I had to stop working out. I COVID for like 5 months. And that's a really interesting way to be too, right? So I'm a lot more cautious and thoughtful and mindful than I've been used to being in years. And that's a relationship though, right? Relationships go through stages and they don't go through guaranteed stages. It isn't like, oh, well, now we're good. It's sort of like, and then something happens where we have to reevaluate all relationships, people, substance, animals. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. Just it ebbs, it flows.
Yeah.
And if I can be looking out to the world with my head up instead of looking down at these details with my little inner accountant who wants to count and say, okay, everything measures up and everything balances here. We're okay. Oh. If I can look up and be with the world, be with people with my heart open, it's a whole better world than what's on my plate, what's on the scale, what size is on the tag of my clothes.
Yeah, that is its own prison, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't weigh very much. I don't like it. Maybe you could coach me on the scale and maybe getting on it occasionally.
No, listen, I think that, but maybe that's what you need right now, right? Like that's an interest, like I think that's the piece that everybody takes such offense to me with. That the diet inside of everybody takes such offense to me with. Like, I was going to say this on the podcast, but I'll tell you it. Like I was saying to my mom a couple of weeks ago, like, I just don't feel motivated to do anything about this weight gain, And she said, well, what would you tell a client that was not motivated to do something again about this weight gain? And I said, I'd probably say, it doesn't sound like you feel ready to do this, And she was like, oh, like, I think she was ready for me to say something magical. that was going to spark me into action. And I, you know, that's what Brad Reedy taught me, you know, it's probably a really good reason why you don't feel ready to do this.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
loving kindness that I think it's important. That's the other side of, that's not body acceptance necessarily. Like it is in its own way, but it's not that sort of all the way polarized body positivity. It's actually a very therapeutic look at motivation. And, you know, if you're not motivated, there's probably a really good reason why.
Yeah.
And I think there is this beautiful thing to say when we think about our wisest mind, that our wisest mind wants us doing the most loving things to ourselves. And sometimes that means having a more rigid stance on things. And sometimes it means not getting on a scale. And sometimes it means getting on a scale. And sometimes it, you know, it just, and that's why it's so important. That's why I love this part that you're talking about, doing your inner work. That's why it's so important to have a relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
So you can be tapped in and know what's right for you. And then so we don't go get these abusive gurus that really capitalize on us hating ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The 5-bite diet guy was nuts.
I would hope so. I hope he was not sane.
Well, and like I got down to my goal weight number.
Right.
And he said, you should be thinner.
Well, you know, he probably made so much money off of that, right? I mean, talk about the best thing you can say to keep your diet addicted customer in your system, which is not good enough.
Not enough.
Not good enough. Wait, it's like Lucy, you know, it's like Lucy in the Peanuts. She's just moving it down. Oh, nope, you missed it there. You missed it there. Gosh, I'm so glad you're out of that. I'm so glad you're in touch with yourself here. What a beautiful.
Getting there.
We're all getting there. I mean, that's what, like, listen, next week's podcast is all about that, right? We're all, not next week, it's in 2 weeks, y'all. But that's like, yeah, I'm getting there too. You know, 12 years in, I'm like, wow, okay, here we are. Got really sick and had to do a whole revamp. Like that's, and I don't have any, not a ion of shame about it. Like that's life. Welcome to life.
Yeah.
Right? Just lean in.
Yes.
Hey, anything you'd want to let anybody know who's struggling?
It's worth it.
Yeah. What is worth it though?
It's worth it to let go of some things that maybe felt like they kept me safe, that it was worth it to let go of some of those things.
Wow.
Get curious about people who seem dangerous, because maybe they're butting up against a in some shackles that I might be walking around in, that I don't even hear them jangling. Yeah.
Yep. There might be some shackles you're walking around. I love that. Like that delusion. Like these aren't shackles. These are bracelets. These aren't shackles I'm walking around in. They're bracelets. And then we realize they're shackles. Oh, that's so beautiful. Hey, thanks for spending time with me. You know, it's a really, just you know, I don't know, like the power of imperfection is really something, and you can tell it shows on you. So thanks for coming and blessing us with your presence on the show today, Joy.
Thanks.